Welcome all. This is the second part. In first part we talked about 30% model review. In this part we are going to talk about what is 60% model review, what are various objectives and all the checkpoints. Discipline wise we'll look into safety related checkpoints, civil structure related checkpoints, mechanical, piping, electrical and instrumentation related checkpoints. So let us start with the topic. First of all, let us look at a few of the interesting facts about 60% model review. We'll try to understand what is 360% model review and why it is required and when it is done. 60% model review is second milestone, right? In design phase of any project life cycle, this is the second milestone, which serves a very important role in any of the projects. 60% 3D model review is intermediate review. Okay, why we are calling it intermediate? Because it is between 30 and 60% model review, which takes place only when final steel structure, final equipment, majority of the major pipe runs, ductwork, instrument, electrical trays have been modeled. That means we can broadly say this is the total scope of 60% model review. From steel structure point of view, mechanical point of view, this has to be done. From piping, major contribution is there. Electrical instrumentation, tray design, we are saying it is final. Now let us first look at time period between 30 and 60% model review. Before starting the 60% model review, first of all, whatever doubts or concerns or observations were captured during 30% model review, we need to ensure that all those observations are closed and updated in 3D model. So these closure can happen before start of 60% model review. Maybe along with the PMC team or with client team, small sessions can be organized to clear the doubts and to reach at final agreement of closure of those 30% tags. Once that is closed, then only 60% can be planned. Now, during 30%, the main agenda was constructability review, right? Accessibility, operability. So those observations once captured and closed, then that means prior to 60% that is closed. Even during 60% also, the client team, operational or construction team can look into the constructability, operability factors so that nothing is left. The model review team discusses the constructability of drawings, right? In the beginning, at the 30% model review time, maybe most of the drawings are not available, but 60% you can look into the drawings also, and any preferred equipment, maybe few critical equipment we can look into the drawings or the locations or operability, the constructability, right? So that is happening before 60%. So during 60% model review, we are saying we are close with all the agendas of 30% at least. Now, 60% model review can be considered as a phase where the value engineering can be implemented. You can look into a lot of factors to optimize the whole design. Any changes or modification after 60% model review will have significant impact on the schedule, cost and overall design. So this is very critical. Before 60% we don't have a lot of vendor information, a lot of design is at immature stage, but after 60% no change is anticipated. If it is done, it will cause a lot of cost and overall design change. So in general, 60% model review is carried out and closed out prior to issuing the piping isometry. So you can say once the 60% model review is conducted, all the tags are closed and agreed with all the stakeholders, then we can plan the isometric phase, which is really very important for fabrication, site erection and construction team. So this is all about 60% model review basics. So now let us look at the objectives of 60% model review. Why we are conducting this, right? First and topmost agenda is to identify any layout modification, any small or bigger, which has impact on safety philosophies, requirements, as previously agreed in 30% model review. Now this is really very important. If you see, during 30% model review we look into the operability, constructability, accessibility factors, right? Prior to 60%, all those observations need to be closed. Now if it is closed but at the same time there are layout modification after 30% model review, those has to be highlighted and captured and presented during 60% model review. That means these changes, especially in layout, has to be reviewed, and it is responsibility of detail engineering contractor that they have to highlight these changes to the client. Now to review the location of secondary fire safety equipment. Right, safety is always first. So the location of fire tender, fire station, fire safety equipments, all those locations need to be reviewed. The complete fire water network, everything can be reviewed in detail to identify if the location of main equipment has been updated. We were talking about change in location change in layout along with equipment location changes. Those has to be highlighted clearly and need to be discussed. Even the minor equipment, if there is any small equipment, that has to be reviewed during 60% model review. Now once this is presented to the client, then overall operability, accessibility and maintainability need to be reviewed for different areas. Although this is done already during 30% model review, but still this is more important than any pipe routing. Now overall, once it is done, the main agenda will always be to improve or modify the whole design to meet the requirement of the project, especially related to safety and operational aspects. Any improvement or any modification which is uh, raised by client or any other stakeholder, that has to be captured and that has to be listed out so that the design is improved. Now UG underground network is more important at this stage because this is the first thing which will be carried out at site. So the main focus, especially from construction team, will always be on UG isometrics, especially during 60% model review. So any cooling water, fire water network, if any underground network is there, that has to be reviewed clearly, that has to be finalized. If any improvement is required, those observations need to be captured for underground network, because a lot of site activity will be associated with this activity. First thing at site will be excavation for underground piping or for underground foundations or stormwater trench. Anything which is undergoing underground has to be carried out first at site, then any other activity. Then the last one is main nozzle orientation. Now in first 30% model review we talked about major nozzles, major orientation of those nozzles. Right here we have to release the final nozzle orientation to the vendor. So once the 60% model review is carried out, the orientation is finalized. If any observation is there that has to be changed in model, then these orientation has to be shared with vendor, so that when the vendors submit their information regarding any equipment, that orientation has to be there. This will save one round of comments with the vendor. So if it is carried out uh, in detail in advance, then we can save a lot of time. So that is why this nozzle orientation information is very important, especially after 60% model review. So the primary purpose of these reviews is to review the routing to ensure that the process integrity has not been compromised. We have to be very careful that all process sequencing is followed, the piping is optimized, the equipment location is optimized with minimum piping BOQ. Not only piping, for every discipline, the optimized BOQ you can say. All the pipe, ductwork, tray runs are in accordance with the minimum criteria. right? So every project will have its own criteria. Those minimum requirements has to be fulfilled. That is the whole purpose of reviewing all these things at 60% model review stage. So now let us look at few of the checkpoints which are checked during 60% model review. Let's start with safety, right? During 60% model review, let us look at few of the critical things only which are looked into. First of all, the safety egress routing as 30% model review comments and review. During 30% also we reviewed this, but those comments especially related to safety egresses has to be reviewed, right? So that we can ensure what was observed, what was discussed during 30% is closed or not. If any observation is there, that can be captured at 60% level also. Primary escape route, right? 30% also we talked about escape routes, but the observations and the final route has to be presented during 60% also, for client comment, for operation, construction, maintenance, erection teams comment. Secondary escape routes confirmation for all unit, this is also one of the checkpoints. Then safe distance between equipment as per previous comment and review, right? So these are few safety related points which were discussed during 30% also, but we need to ensure that whatever the discussions were during 30% are incorporated and presented in detail. Location of vents and exhausts, all PSV outlet systems, any other vents, major vents and exhaust in safe area, those need to be reviewed. Identification of fire hazard zones, restricted zones or impacted zones. Any hazard, any risk involved in complete layout has to be identified, discussed and agreed. Eye wash, safety shower, these are very much required during operation. If any emergency happens, these eye wash and safety showers play a really important role at site. So these locations has to be agreed with client, with the operation team especially. So these need to be modeled before 60%, and during 60% it has to be presented to the operational team so that they can say these are okay, or if they want to add any additional eye shower, safety shower at some other location, that can be captured and that has to be incorporated after 60% model review. Then review of adequate access for firefighting equipment. Okay, firefighting is very important. The firefighting network, hydrant monitor, right? How the fire will be handled in case of any emergency during operation. Those criteria has to be reviewed, especially with safety team, especially with the operational team. They know what kind of hazard is there, how they have handled those hazards in past. So their recommendations will be very important for specific plant. So this has to be reviewed along with all the stakeholders, and the adequate access has to be planned, agreed and incorporated. So these are few of the points related to safety which need to be checked during 60% model review in the presence of all these stakeholders. Now let us look at few of the checkpoints related to civil department which we really need to check during 60% model review. First of all, main and secondary access roads, which includes road crossings and culverts, right? At this stage during 60%, all the routing, all the equipment foundations, locations are finalized. So we really need to look into the main and secondary accesses. Complete road layout is reviewed. If any additional width is required, especially to park the cranes for the crane movement or to take a U-turn, those kind of things has to be reviewed, right? Especially with respect to road width, road layout, safety with respect to vehicle movement on these roads, with respect to all the crane capacities, considering the movement of all the vehicle. So this has to be reviewed, especially during 60% model review. Once it is finalized, then road layout can be issued to site. That is a whole agenda. Infrastructure, administrating buildings, laboratory, central control room, electrical, warehouse, maintenance shop. This is all non-process buildings, right? So this has to be finalized before 60% model review. So this can be reviewed during 60%, and any requirement, additional requirement if raised by a client or operational team, those has to be incorporated. So this is again a very good checkpoint, especially with respect to non-process buildings. Pipe rack and pipe corridor as per 30% model review comments. So during 30% also the main corridors are planned, are shown to the client, right? So those observations or modifications into or later changes after 30% model review has to be shown, especially related to pipe rack. What is the width of pipe rack, height of pipe rack, right? How the vehicle movement is planned, how the control valve assemblies are planned, how PSV locations are there. So all those things has to be shown in detail, which are related to pipe rack. Then the location of interceptors, effluent treatment facilities, how the drain management is there, how we are going to treat the waste materials, how we are moving towards effluent treatment plant, and how there is a movement from effluent treatment plant. So all those aspects are reviewed. Equipment support, foundation, pedestals, right? These three things are specially reviewed with respect to interference with underground piping. There will be underground piping, there will be underground networks related to fire water, cooling water, potable water. So those may get clashed with these underground facilities. So these are reviewed, whether proper spacing is there, additional space between foundation is there or not, right? How the foundation installation can be done at site, what will be the sequence at site to install these. So all those discussions happens with respect to civil checkpoints. Underground facilities we already discussed. These are these are looked into with respect to interference with other facilities, especially with respect to piping and civil, because these are the two disciplines where both the items go underground. So those interference has to be reviewed. At road crossings, maybe culverts are used, so those design, what kind of design culvert for culvert is used, what is the depth of culvert, how many piping is moving to inside the culvert, and how it is coming above ground. So all those interfaces are discussed and reviewed during 60% model review. Stormwater trench, cache basins, pits, trench layout, everything has to be finalized and has to be presented in 60% model review, right? Stormwater, how the drain management is done, cache basins, how it is collected and then transferred from one location to another, what kind of pits are there, if valves are there, how we are going to operate it, if the valve stem is lower, whether the extended stems are used or not. So all those aspects has to be reviewed in detail. Perimeter and fencing layout, okay, what kind of roads are there at periphery, how we are fencing it, right? How many security gates are there, security cabins are planned, how the entry is restricted for external stakeholders. So those kind of reviews will be done for civil design during 60% model review. Now let us talk about the structural checkpoint. What kind of design points we check during 60%, especially with respect to structural design. In 30% model review also we talked about primary and secondary steel framing, right? But those were not designed one. During 60% we looked into the actual design. Also, if any major observation was there during 30% model review which is still open, that can be reviewed. Design of main access, intermediate platforms, right? Main access to each and every valve, instrument, or any top platforms at top of pipe rack, where PSVs are located, right? Intermediate platforms at battery limit, or maybe a vertical column is there, their intermediate platforms with respect to its bracing, ladder, accessibility, opening of manholes, everything has to be reviewed during 60% model review. Then review technological buildings, blast proof shelters. Okay, if compressors are there, then maybe there are few shelters, their design, EOT movement, operator movement, the heaviest part, how we are going to remove it, where we are going to place it, how the accessibility is planned within the shelter. Those aspects has to be reviewed. Then all the technological structure, if any vessel is located at top in between a structure, how we are going to remove it. For example, if compressor, for example, if heat exchanger is placed at around 3 meter elevation, then how the bundle will be removed, how the bonnet can be opened, how the drains, valves, right, vents can be accessed, how the control valve assembly is placed. All those things with respect to technological building will be discussed. Then ladders, supporting structure, handrails, right, these need to be modeled and presented during 60% model review. How an operator is going to reach at any platform, right, the placement of opening door with respect to any opening or the valve handles, everything need to be modeled and shown. All kind of pipe racks, if any joints are there, bracings are there, or any cantilevered supports are there, right, extended platforms are there, those need to be presented, modeled and shown to the stakeholders present during 60% model review. So these are the major points, checkpoints with respect to structural team. Those need to be reviewed during 60% model review. Now let us talk about few of the checkpoints related to mechanical discipline, which are checked during 60% model review. First of all, during 30% model review also, the major equipment locations are always reviewed. So any observation which was captured during 30% is discussed, or any change in location of major equipment is also discussed. So these are the few checkpoints which really need to be taken care during 60% model review. Then mechanical handling, equipment location, right, how we are going to handle the operation. If there is a element which we need to remove or we need to lift, how we are going to do it, right, the davit at top of column or maybe at top of pipe rack, how we are going to operate the davit, how we are going to lower the elements from height to grade level, whether all the spacing is kept for carrying out all these maintenance activities or not. All those mechanical handling activities are reviewed. Then package unit layout and its orientation. During 30% model review also we talked about the package unit, right? But at the 60% model review time, the matured vendor data is available. So we can always look into the actual orientation of nozzles with respect to any package, how the piping is connected, whether the minimum piping is done, whether the optimized layout is done, whether the operation accessibility is there or not, right, at battery limit especially. So all those specially related to package items are reviewed. Primary equipment platforms, right, valves, maintenance as per previous comment. So any equipment will be having valves, we need to plan the ladder, intermediate platforms, the access to the ladder, access to the valves. So all those accessibility with respect to all these equipment has to be reviewed. Secondary equipment platforms for valves as per previous comment. So primary and secondary both are reviewed. These are one of the checkpoint for both primary and secondary equipment platforms. Then location of all process and utility equipment. This is again, once we talked about these location during 30%, but final locations has to be established during 60%. After 60% there is no chance of changing, especially the equipments, right? So these are few of the checkpoints. especially related to mechanical department, which are checked during 60% model review in the presence of all these stakeholders. Now let us talk about a few of the checkpoints related to piping, which are checked during 60% model review. First of all, the piping team has to freeze all the big bore lines. This has to be stress analyzed. The critical line routing has to be finalized. So this is the main thing. The client operation team or any other stakeholder can ask for uh, any routing for stress critical line. They can look into the stress package, they can look into the support selection criteria, they can look into the stress report for a particular system. So those has to be finalized before 60%, and this is one of the major checkpoint, especially related to piping. So large bore piping is main review point. All the instrument tappings, connections and locations, these are the uh, major checkpoints. So PID client can go into the PID, they can look into each and every line, each and every instrument connection, each and every accessibility concern with respect to instrument valve, right? So all the process lines up to 4-inch are reviewed. If that is not a major plant, then the yellow off of the PIDs can also be carried out during 60% model review, right? Each and every line can be reviewed, especially routing. Then utility lines between 2 to 10 inch, these are also reviewed. Again, client, it is on client wish whether they want to go each and every line. They can go for yellow for all the utility lines also. Major and journal pipe support locations, as when we are inviting all these stakeholders for 60% model review, we are saying that we are done with stress analysis. All the stress analysis is done, supporting is done, it is modeled, all the stress reports are ready, so that we can ensure that there are no major changes after 60% model review. So with respect to all the large bore lines, stress analysis and its design should be shown. It can be checked during 60% model review. So detailing of piping network to show all the auxiliary items which are there in the PID. All the special items, all the associated items has to be modeled, their location, space required, the accessibility, everything has to be modeled and shown. This is the checkpoint during 60% model review. Piping networks on pipe rack, including all the expansion loops. Again, these loops has to be finalized with respect to stress analysis. Along with these stress loops, expansion loops, we have to show the supporting arrangement for that. Whether if it is at elevation, then how the structure design is done to take care of the supporting of these loops. So all those aspects has to be shown. Piping team has to be ready with all these things so that they can give confidence to construction team, operation team, erection team that the design is final, and they can proceed with the next step, that is issuing the isometrics. So these are few of the checkpoints with respect to piping team which are reviewed during 60% model review in the presence of all these stakeholders. Now there are few checkpoints with respect to electrical and instrumentation discipline. So let us look at which are reviewed during 60% model review. First of all, major electrical equipment, their location has to be finalized. Although this was reviewed at 30% model review also, but same has to be looked into and finalized. Primary layout of overhead cables, right? Especially with respect to height and statutory requirements, safety requirements, main cable trays in block in electrical rooms. So these layouts are ready during 60% model review, right? So client can also ask for these drawings. They can ask to show these drawings during 60% model review. Not only 3D but the drawings also can be reviewed can be looked into for a specific requirement. Lighting of all locations, how the lighting is planned for each and every corner uh, with respect to the requirement of illumination, so that has to be ready in 3D model. So this is one of the major checkpoints. Packaged equipment, motors, electrical heaters, control panel, locations, right, especially related to packaged item, because most of the time these are missed. These are in sub vendors scope, so most of the time the information is not available. If there is any such package for which the major critical items information is not available, then a design contractor can always request for a specific or a separate session to review those items when it is available from sub vendors. So preliminary cable route, right, in 30% model review also the cable route is planned, but it is actually shown during 60% model review, because that time the number of cables, the width of trays, the route of trays is known. So this is reviewed during 60% model review. Location and volume of electrical control room. Location and volume means we have to be ready with the detailed design of substation, electrical building, control rooms, so that each and every aspect can be discussed. Most of the time these are not modeled in so detailed, but the drawings must be available during 60% model review, so that any specific requirement can be checked based on past experience or maybe based on operational team requirement. So these drawings can be reviewed. Main cable tray and junction box locations. This is topmost agenda, especially related to electrical instrumentation. These junction box and cable tray route has to be modeled, especially up to particular size as per design basis. Those cable trays route, their supporting arrangement, their connection with the junction box, the location of junction box has to be modeled. Local control panel, local junction boxes, inline instrument mounting devices, so all these has to be ready, has to be modeled. These are the checkpoint, how these can be approached, how can be installed, right, during operation, how the operator movement will be there. All those accessibility, installation, erection requirement, everything has to be clear in 3D model. Same for field instrument, stanchions requirement to piping instrument tapping points. So these are the small tappings on piping, so accessibility to these, right, the type of tappings, the type of interfaces with the instrument and piping, all those has to be ready in 3D model in as well as in drawings also. So piping instrument interface drawings has to be ready. These can be looked into during 60% model review for a particular requirement. So instrument stands according to the permanent accessibility, right? So any design basis will tell us, project design basis will tell us what kind of accessibility has to be provided. So all those instruments has to have those required accessibility. For example, if for few instruments there will be permanent platform requirement, for few of the instruments where we can look into visually, for that ladder requirement is there. So those requirement for project specific requirements can be checked during 60% model review. So these are few of the checkpoints specially related to electrical and instrumentation, which are checked during 60% model review in the presence of all these stakeholders. So this was all about 60% model review. We were looking into what is 60% model review, what are various objectives, and we talked about various checkpoints discipline wise: safety, civil and structural, mechanical, piping, electrical and instrumentation. So discipline wise we looked into all the checkpoints. So thank you for watching. See you in the next part.